Hello, everyone. Good morning. Welcome back to another episode of A Little Atypical. My name is Elijah. You can call me Lay. And if you can tell by the title of the video, I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to name it. It's probably going to be something along the lines of how to not let your failures and setbacks keep you from achieving your goals. This week, the theme is all about productivity and work ethic. I thought this was very important to talk about because I do think this is around the time people start feeling discouraged around their goals, feel like they're not making enough progress, feel like they're already falling off. And honestly, that's really relatable. Last week, I had a pretty hard week where I was just feeling terrible all around. I felt a lot of pain. I was overly exhausted and I felt like I couldn't think or concentrate. And then I was feeling a lot of guilt because even like the thing I said I was going to do, which was like still have an open one letter for that week, I just couldn't do it. I was just really overwhelmed and I was just feeling so many emotions and it was just hard for me to function. Then I was like, okay, this is not the first time that happened though. So what can I learn from this? It seems like this is a pattern. It is probably a hormonal issue, a health issue. Even when I'm watching back and I'm doing like a lot of editing for my upcoming vlog, I even hear myself talking about the same things, how I didn't feel good this week, that I'm just trying to push through the best. So it just seems like a pattern, and it's like, what can I learn from that pattern? In this episode, I'm gonna give you tips on how to not let your failures and setbacks keep you from achieving your goals. The number one thing that helped me this week and why I'm able to just bounce back right away and not let the guilt and negative feelings about that goal consume me is because one thing I learned is you have to acknowledge failure without going into crisis mode. And you're probably thinking, how do I do that? Because honestly, when we think of failure in a negative way, in a negative light, it's actually a trauma response, is probably one of the reasons you're doing it. If you had a parent who was overly strict, setting goals and standards for yourself can feel like a punishment. It feels like you're not able to grasp working towards your goals in the same light because when you had to as a child, because I feel like with goal setting and trying to improve your life and all the context with that, there is a lot of mundane things and your thinking around it may not always be the healthiest. You may find it boring. You may find it like, I would rather do something else. And I think when you react that way, that's why it feels like that. If you had a parent that's too strict or something along those lines. Or on the other hand, if you had a parent who gave like no structure and guidance, you always had to like make decisions for yourself. You can actually end up making decisions for yourself that are too harsh and burns you out. But that's because you never had anyone to teach you to manage it, of what's too extreme versus like what is actually manageable, and to have like a balanced lifestyle. And also another reason could be perfectionism. I think with our goals, we like kind of make it into a crisis, and it's kind of weird. If we were talking to a friend who didn't achieve their goals, we would say something along the lines like, you did the best you can, you really did put in your best effort. And we say that because we're saying it from an outside perspective. But with perfectionism, we can see other people's failures as not a part of them. We can see that maybe something just came up for them and we notice things outside of them. We can't do that for ourselves. When you're in a perfectionist mindset, or in an all or nothing mindset where you feel like, if I don't do it this way, that I might as well just give up. And that mindset is not healthy either. So what you can do in this category of like acknowledging your failures without going into crisis mode is kind of rethinking how you see your failures. Because one thing, when I was working on a podcast with a group, something someone said is like they started seeing those things like the setbacks as speed bumps. And I thought that was one of the most beautiful ways to describe things not going your way is a speed bump, because you take your time to get over them, but you eventually do. But I also think if you can't process it that way, I was thinking about another way of how you can think about failures. And what I came up with was kind of thinking of it through the lens of the scientific method. I don't know if y'all remember this from when you grew up, but I remember learning the scientific method. And this is gonna sound like such a nerd response to lifestyle, and I get it. I get how this can sound boring, but like, hear me out. If you view your life as an experiment of what is the best quality of life for yourself or what will make you the most content, then you won't see your failures as like this heavy thing. You'll kind of see it as data points. So with the scientific method, how it works, I'm just going to give you a quick refresher. You ask a question, in this case, in terms of your life, is like, what will allow you to have the best quality of life for yourself that aligns with you, aligns with your values? That is the question, right? And then you do background research, which is like looking at different things that people try to elevate their lives. That's why you watch content like how to become the next it girl or it guy or whatever. Essentially, that's research. It's looking at what is already out there, what people say help their lives. And that's why you like content like this. If you want like some inspo, just like shameless self-promo, my last podcast from last week is all about things I've been doing, what's in and what's out for me. So, check it out if you need some inspiration of things that can elevate your life. But anyways, then create like a hypothesis, which is like, what things do you really want to try? What speaks to you? And you can kind of think about this like when you're doing your background research of like, what are things you always wanted to do if life didn't get in the way? Like, think about that when you're doing your background research. Because the answer for that for some people may be different. The thing is, the things you're most curious about, that should be your hypothesis. And what I mean by that is, let's say you were always curious about doing something more physically active, right? And something unconventional that took your mind was like rock climbing. So your hypothesis would be, if I make an effort to learn rock climbing, it will improve my quality of life, because not only it will give me health benefits, it is something that I was always interested in. I always wanted to try because X, Y, and Z, whatever. Like, turn it into a hypothesis. And then you test your experiment through your actions. And when you ask yourself after doing the procedure, the experiment, is it working? If it's not working, right, that's your failure. And it becomes a data point. Think about what you can learn from what is failing about it. So if you thought, like, let's go back to the example of rock climbing. Maybe you tried to do it by yourself. Maybe trying it with someone else will improve your quality, because maybe that if you had someone to do it with you, that it will be a quality time thing with each other. And if that's your love language, it will feel great, because maybe the reason why you struggle to do rock climbing is because even though you might enjoy it, it takes too much time away from people you care about. So if you maybe like offer like to do something with someone and make it like a thing, maybe that will motivate you more in the process. But that's something you can only figure out from failing. So if you think about it that way and think of it as like a data point, that you've been doing it for a while too, and something about the procedure isn't working, you also need to make sure you're doing things long enough for it to succeed. I think sometimes we try to rush the process. I'm going to admit this, like with my content creation journey, it does frustrate me that people blow up like overnight. But then I realize like they're making such different content than me, and the way they express their creativity is very different from the way I express my creativity. I do know that I try to add a lot more like science-based, strategy and stuff like that into my research, and that's not going to resonate with everyone. But I have to be patient and give people time to, I guess, find me, because I feel like the right people will always find you, some shape or form. Make sure you're giving yourself enough time to really see if something is failing or succeeding, because I do think a lot of times we get impatient with the process and with some goals, but it just happens because we're in such a fast-paced society. So moving on, the next thing you need to do, like while analyzing what went wrong, analyzing the failure, analyzing the setback, is honestly self-accountability. I know that's a scary word for some people because accountability for them is a form of blame or a form of punishment. But if you stop looking at it as blame, you won't really need to feel the need to wallow in it. Like when I talk about this, I'm kind of thinking about Fruit Basket. It's an anime for people who don't know, but it's like one of my favorite animes. And the zodiac of the monkey, they always apologize for everything and their existence, and they're always so like anxious about the way they take accountability. I'm not saying to do that, because if your accountability is attached to shame, guilt, or anxiety, it's not going to process well. So if you start thinking as taking accountability as ownership of your actions, it will make you think that everything in life stops happening to you, and you can really understand that when you take responsibility, it's saying you're claiming what's actually in your control. Because realistically, the only things that are actually in our control is our actions, our mindset, how we choose to perceive things. And a lot of times there are like restraints on those, especially if you've been subjected to trauma and had situations that ruined your mental health. An action you can do to improve that is looking up resources. If you can't afford things to help that, there are so many resources online. I feel like it takes a lot longer, and you will really have to be patient with yourself to really digest that information. And also, not every type of therapy is for everyone, depending on their stage of what they need assistance with. And maybe if you can't do it alone, and you shouldn't have to do these things alone, is if you can ask someone for help, where you're asking them to support you, but you need to know there's a difference between having someone support you and what that can look like versus becoming overly dependent. Because while we do need community, we do need people to help us in some shape or form, there is a balance. And when you do self accountability, you realize, like, yes, you know what's are the variables that are outside your control too. But what you could do in that case is kind of ask yourself, what can you do in that situation realistically? Because the thing is, the world is not suited for everyone's needs. It's sad, but it's true. Because if the world was suited for everyone's needs, some things wouldn't be a thing. Even like talking to my mom. Like, I'm gonna give you like the most random example, which is when I talked to her about like, why did I have to go back to school? Because I was feeling frustrated that I had to once again change my process, change my functions, and the change wasn't in my control. Even though I was grateful in the sense that I get to learn what I get to learn, but I just hated going back to school in person. I hated the train. I hated that because I lived far away, that I had to wake up really early and walk in the dark by myself. And as a girl, a woman, sometimes that's just terrifying. But I stopped thinking, even now, I kind of wish I thought this before, that regardless, I was lucky to get an education, lucky to meet interesting people who either added to my thoughts and people who were just so passionate that I should have felt encouraged by their passion instead of feeling like I didn't care enough. Which, it's not that I didn't care enough about my major. It was more the fact that because of the circumstances, I couldn't really enjoy it to the fullest. And I think also the reason I felt like that is because personally I'm an introvert, and I do look at the world as like being more extrovert centric because of how they view working together and teamwork. But me as an introvert, because it's so many different personalities, you either get people who like the control, or you get people who don't care enough. And I think I'm a pretty middle ground person when it comes to like projects, because I do understand like, oh, everyone has different schedules, so working at certain times it's fair for everyone, and also talking about it and planning it out. So I actually prefer people who work ahead, but I don't like when people dictate everything and make me feel like I don't have like good ideas or good opinions. That is what would bother me. But anyways, what I'm saying is, in that situation and knowing the variables that are in my control, the most important thing I could have controlled at that point was my mindset. And every day I'm still learning how to do that better. So it's a process. And the last thing I want to talk about in terms of not allowing failure to get to you is kind of reframing your goals. The reason why I want to talk about this one specifically is because there is so much goal setting formats. I don't know many execution cycles, because the only one I know and I've been working with is the 12-week year. So that is what I would call like an execution plan of like, how am I going to do this? But goal setting is a little bit different, because I grew up using SMART goals. So specific, measurable, I think achievable, realistic, and time-based. We learned that in high school, and that's how they made us set our goals, right? And then I've been doing research on different goal setting formats, because the thing about SMART goals, at least for me, is they're too focused on the outcome. As someone who has tunnel vision sometimes, it's very easy for me to only see my goal and then get frustrated if it's not looking like how I want the outcome to look like, and then feel discouraged and want to quit, and probably do quit. I'm looking up different goal setting formats. In the book I'm reading, it's called Feel Good Productivity. I can't pronounce his name, but you'll see me talk about it in this week's video, and I'll put it on the screen. What he mentions is something called NICE goals. And then when doing my research, there was also something called FAST goals. There was something called CLEAR goals. There's just so many different goal setting formats. So if something failed, maybe it's not necessarily you or the goal. It's probably how you formatted yourself thinking about the goal. And I think it takes time to really learn which one will work best for you. So maybe do more research and reframe your goal, and maybe reframe it based on the format. But if it is the goal, maybe you should think about if the goal is too strict, and if you can break it down into something smaller. Because sometimes we do have big goals, but sometimes the thing we're envisioning will take a longer term than what we actually think it will. And maybe in a short term, we can think about how to break it down further that's achievable, that would make you want to work towards it every day, that may give you even better results than how you think about it. For example, if your goal is to, I'm going to just use myself as an example. Like if my goal is to, let's say my goal is 7,000 by the end of March, right? Could it be realistic? Possibly, but it's only realistic if I take smaller actions. So instead of focusing on what I can do to get that number, I need to be focusing on how I can work on it on a daily basis that doesn't make my head spin. And the thing I came up with doing that is I post all my content towards the end of the week. I even am changing my posting schedule because I get so stressed out when my video doesn't upload by Wednesday. But I'm gonna still put it in and try to finish editing it by Tuesday, Wednesday. That way, so it could just be uploaded and in the drafts, Because sometimes with my editing style, it does take a long time to upload. And then it just stresses me out that I'm not doing it on time. And then I turn into crisis mode, like, oh my God, I'm not doing the right thing. So since I know that has been a thing, I'm just going to make sure all my content is filmed, recorded, and edited at the beginning of the week. Everything will be seen by other people towards the end of the week. And I'm perfectly okay with that. And then on a daily basis, what I can be doing is instead of keep checking if the number has grown, I can be thinking about different ways to promote my content on a smaller scale using shorter forms of content. Because while I do love longer forms of content, I think they're better. And I think digesting longer forms of content is actually healthier for us as humans, because TikTok and Instagram Reels and everything like that has ruined our attention spans. And also maybe because of the type of person I am, where I feel like it's better to explain things because it has more information, that when you have short form content, it's like you always have to grab everyone's attention, You have to say it fast enough. You have to do it fast enough. And I think I personally feel pressured by short form content. But if I can think about it of how to use it to my advantage, what I guess advantages are on each platform. If I don't for example, making short videos, maybe I could just use photo mode. Maybe I can use stories. There are so many different things you can do to express your creativity, express promotion, and you just gotta get used to the tools that are on the platform. You gotta get used to how the algorithm shifts, and that's perfectly okay. So with that being said, we are at the end of this video. End of this recording. It did take me a lot longer, and I need to wash out my hair. Let's get to the tarot card pull of the week. The tarot card pull of the episode. When I was doing my thing, writing everything down, I actually had the 6 of Wands come out. And I thought it was so funny because what the 6 of Wands mean and is associated with is success, public recognition, progress, and self-confidence. And it says things like, when it shows up, you have reached an important milestone or achieved a significant goal, and you are confident, self-assured, and successful. You harness your strengths and talents to bring out a happy outcome in your endeavors and made it through the chaos. And I think this card came out to have more of a positive note to this otherwise heavy episode, because failures do send us in a spiral, right? But if we can see it in a more positive light, that we will eventually be successful, that success will come no matter what, as long as we don't let our emotions hold us back, as long as we don't let failures hold us back, and if we stop looking as failures as an enemy to our success instead of just a part of it. And also it says something along the lines of it encourages you to put yourself out there and be proud of what you achieved. Shout your success from the rooftop and set it all out there for people to see, and be open to receiving love and support. And I just think that's such a beautiful way to put it and to think about the card. Moving on to what I am grateful for. I think I am very grateful for, this is going to sound strange, but I feel grateful for technology. I think technology should be thought of in a neutral sense, because essentially technology is just tools, We can use it for good or we can use it for bad. And I think in this age, technology isn't appreciated enough. We get angry at it and we blame it because we get addicted to it. But I also think it's because it happened so rapidly that we didn't know how to balance our lives with technology. But I do think technology is so amazing. We can share ideas at such a rapid pace and like explore new concepts because of technology. We can listen to each other's ideas, we can get inspired by people, we can have like these great conversations all because of technology. And I do think that because of technology, there is a lot more self-awareness in the world. So yeah, I'm very grateful for that. But that is all for today. I hope you have a good day, evening, or night whenever you're listening to this, because your girl has to do her maintenance day. And if you're listening on Spotify, I really am so grateful. I would also really love to hear your opinion. So if you want to check out my YouTube channel, I would be so happy, since it is the same context and there is a lot more on there. If you're listening on YouTube, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, because I do love doing this. However, without growth, I don't know how possible it is for me to keep doing this. So I love helping you, and I do appreciate the support, and I hope this can be a mutual thing. So without further ado, have a great whatever time of day, and I will talk to you next time. Okay, bye!